kayong lahat. So, before I introduce to you our guest, allow me to read to you this meeting's guidelines. 1, we will place everyone on mute once you are inside the session to ensure there are no distractions, sounds, music, and other noises during the session. 2, please ensure your name, your first and last name, is on your profile for us to recognize you. The organizers have the option to remove participants who enter without their names on their profile. 3, the public chat will be available for everyone to post their comments, thoughts, and questions. Please remain respectful and professional in your posts and questions. You can also directly chat with anyone in the group. 4, the moderator and co-moderator will be the ones to read the relevant questions posted in the chat and refer these to our guest. 5, you may show your feedback to the speaker's points using the emojis in the reaction tab. 6, this session is recorded and may be uploaded in the College 1980 FB page and College 80 YouTube channel. 7, ito po mahalaga, pakinggan niyo po. Please turn off your videos for internet stability purposes. We will request you to turn on your videos later. 8, we are here to learn and expand our knowledge, to grow as persons together. Hence, respect, trust, and open-mindedness are key. So, handa na ba kayong makinig, umunawa, at mangilatis? Yan. Let's begin. Okay, I'll introduce our speaker. This man's surname is very familiar to our generation. We know his father, the Honorable Jose W. Diokno, as the father of human rights advocacy in the Philippines. I'm sure most of us voted for him in 2019 and were dismayed that he did not make it. For the 2022 senatorial elections, this man wants to win. His reaching out to us actually started this Kilalanin Natin Sila series. He is father of 6, Filipino, lawyer, chairman of Free Legal Assistance Group or FLAG, and founding dean of De La Salle College of Law. Attorney Chel Diokno, Mighty 80 welcomes you. Good evening, Attorney Chel. Please go ahead and greet our participants.
Good evening, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. Thank you as well to the Ateneo Mighty 80 batch of Wallo Lim and Paulo Abustan, who are the organizers of this event. I see Erin Tanyada, my good friend, also among those who are here this evening. Maraming salamat sa inyong paanyaya na ako'y magpakilala at mapag-usapan din natin kung ano ba yung mga isusulong ko kung tayo ay umabot sa Senado. I'm Chel Diokno. I'm a father, I'm a teacher, and a lawyer. Most of you here probably know something about me, although others just have heard my name and maybe associate my name only with one feature of my physical body, and that is my teeth. Kasi tuwing pinag-uusapan natin yung mga issue ng bayan, problema ng pagkain, problema ng kalayaan, problema ng trabaho at problema ng katarungan, ay may nagpupuna sa aking ngipin. Pangit daw, etc. etc. Actually, okay lang sa akin yun. Medyo sanay na tayo dyan. Pero kung pag-uusapan nila yung ngipin ko, ay dapat pag-usapan din nila yung sobrang malalaking bungi at yung nabubulok sa ating minamahal na inang bayan. And truly, ang dami talagang inhustisya dito sa Pilipinas. It's not just a question of lack of justice in the courts, but we see injustice all around us wherever we go. There are injustices that have happened because of the pandemic. Yung mga frontliner natin, mga medical frontliner natin na pati buhay ay tinataya, marami sa kanila hindi pa rin nakakatanggap ng mga benepisyo na nakataga na sa bato, nasa batas na. And yet, up to now, many of them have not received. And if they get, they only get a tiny, tiny amount compared to the risks that they are taking. Ang mga negosyante natin, especially our MSMEs, who comprise 99% of the businesses and who employ about 64% of our workforce, ay matagal nang naghihikahos. And yet, wala naman silang nararamdaman na tulong, lalong-lalo na sa ating pamahalaan. If ever, natutulungan sila ng private sector din. And yet, because of their big impact on the economy, our government should have stepped in a long time ago. Ordinary Filipinos who were victims or, let's say, violators, sabihin na lang natin, of quarantine, who ended up spending days or weeks or some even months in jail for simple quarantine violations, which to me is not the right penalty or punishment for people who violate quarantine. Dapat naman talaga may parusa sila, pero hindi siguro makatao yung nag-violate ka ng curfew tapos isang buwan ka makukulong bago ka makakauwi sa pamilya natin. And these are just some examples of the injustices that we experience because of the pandemic. Not to mention the injustices that we saw even before the pandemic and which continue and will continue unless we do something about it. Kasi mismo yung justice system natin ay hindi makatarungan. It's so ironic that the system that is supposed to deliver justice to our people has a double standard and does not dispense justice in the way that it should. And that applies not just to ordinary people who happen to get involved in cases, but even to business disputes and to all sorts of cases that have to be litigated in our courts. Kaya sa akin talagang kailangan natin ayusin yung malalaking bungi dito sa ating Pilipinas. And it all begins with elections. Election pa lang ay naging popularity contest na may kasama pang dayaan, kaya hindi na will of the people ang nakikita natin, kundi kung sino yung may pinakamagandang sayaw o pinakamagandang advertisement. Pag nahalal na sila, imbis na manilbi sa bayan at talagang iuna ang interest ng taong bayan, ang inuuna nila yung interest ng sarili. At marami pa dyan ay sa bulsa pa nila napupunta yung pera ng bayan. And everything else flows from there. Issues of corruption, issues of organized crime. Paano natin maayos to? And my question to everyone I meet is, okay lang ba sa inyo to na ganito na lang tayo? Paano yung ating mga anak, mga susunod na henerasyon? Wala na ba tayong gagawin para ayusin itong malalaking bungi at grabing pagka-inhustisya sa atin? That's why I have made a personal commitment. I have made a vow to myself and to my God that I will fight for justice in our country. I've been doing this in the private sector for the last 30 years. And I intend to continue to do this whatever position I'm brought into. Whether I win in the elections or not, sa akin itutuloy ko pa rin yung pakikipaglaban para sa hustisya. Kasi ako mismo, hindi ko matatanggap ito na yung aking mga anak ay lalaki sa isang bansa na walang pananagutan, sa isang bansa na palakasan na lang ng palakasan, sa isang bansa na puro korupsyon na lang, sa isang bansa na double standard ang justice. Hindi ko na masikmura yung ganitong sistema. At ako'y nananawagan sa inyo, if you agree with me that we cannot live in a system like this, then we must work hand in hand to change it. Kaya ako, tama na yan. Palitan na natin yan. Sobra na yan. Hindi na pwede para sa ating mga anak at mga susunod na henerasyon ng mga Pilipino, yung ganitong klaseng sistema. You've asked me to talk about 3 specific issues. There are many issues that I have included in my platform, but I'd like to spend the next few minutes just focusing on 3. The first is issues of corruption, graft and corruption. The second and third are related. Issues of how we can strengthen our MSMEs as well as address issues of unemployment and underemployment in the country. First, Pagdating sa graft and corruption, kailangan na kailangan natin lagyan ng ngipin ang ating anti-corruption laws. Those laws were crafted more than 40, 50 years ago, and the penalties for the laws, for the offenses, are quite low. Kaya ang una ko sanang gustong gawin pagdating sa issue ng corruption ay balikan yung Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act at taasan ang mga parusa doon. Pangalawa, we have to go back to the plunder law. The plunder law has been, let's say, weakened or somehow, in a sense, decimated by the decisions of the Supreme Court in the recent plunder cases. I think there is room for amendment of some provisions to make sure that those who steal not just millions but 50 million up are given the appropriate penalties and are held accountable. Next, when it comes to corruption, kailangan natin ayusin yung ating mga nagdedesisyon sa kaso ng corruption. Because after all, it's really the judiciary that will impose punishment. Kahit ano pang mahanap ng law enforcement natin, pagdating sa korte, sila na talaga dapat ang maghahatol niyan. So we have to strengthen the entire justice system to make sure that the corrupt, especially the most corrupt, get punished and go to jail. How do we do that? Kailangan natin palakasin yung Office of the Ombudsman, especially when it comes to policing the judiciary. As a member of the legal community, as a law practitioner for so many years, we know in the legal community about corruption, but it's so difficult to prove because syempre yung mga nangungurap dyan, hindi naman nila pinahahalata at ayaw nila mabisto. So this is done in secret and only a few people are involved. So we need to have the Ombudsman conduct lifestyle checks of our judges. Because if a judge is living way beyond or is living way beyond his or her means, then obviously may issue dyan. Saan nanggagaling yung pera para pambili ng isang bahay na 10 milyon at isang sasakyan na 3-4 na milyon ang halaga. Aside from that, we have to have more teeth in our SALN laws. The statement of assets and liabilities is such a valuable weapon in making sure that our officials do not gain ill-gotten wealth while they are in power. Yun ang nagiging batayan kung ano yung assets and liabilities nila nung sila ay pumasok sa pamahalaan. At doon natin din makikita kung if they're also living beyond their means. Kaya ako, I'm so saddened by the recent measures that have made it so much harder for any citizen to get the copies of the SALNs of our officials. Dapat baliktad yon. The law is very clear. As long as you pay the minimal fee, if you're a citizen of our country, you should be entitled to get a copy of the SALN of any official, especially the highest officials of the 3 branches of our government. So kailangan natin lagyan din ng ngipin ang ating SALN law. There are other things I'd like to do about corruption, but I know our time is limited. So let me move on to the second and the third issues, which is the problems of strengthening our MSMEs and also our issues of unemployment. Because of the pandemic, our MSMEs and the lockdowns especially, our MSMEs have been so severely affected. And they employ around 64% of our workforce. So pag sila ay nag-cut down o nag-close, ang apektado hindi lang yung may-ari ng negosyo, kundi lahat ng mga manggagawa nila at lahat ng kanilang mga pamilya. And yet, the government has not been providing them with any kind of financial assistance except for loans. Pero yung loans, ang problema kasi, mamamatay na nga yung negosyo natin, mangungutang ka, hindi mo pa rin maayos ang problema. So I fully support Vice President Leni's proposal to establish a fiscal stimulus package for MSMEs on 2 conditions. Number 1, that they will not remove any workers. So kung tatanggapin nila yung pera na yan, dapat wala silang tanggalan ng empleyado. Number 2, that they will use the money to retrofit their business so that it will be COVID, let's say, not COVID-free, but at least it will minimize COVID contagion. What do I mean? The studies now show that ventilation, especially being in an air-conditioned place, promote COVID infections. So we have to find more ways to encourage our businesses to go outdoors. While it may be a hassle in terms of getting papawisan tayo, at least hindi tayo makakasakit. Number two, they will need to invest, our entrepreneurs will need to invest in air filters and similar kinds of devices that will also make sure that the air is COVID-free. So ito yung mga bagay na tingin ko kailangan talaga ng bigyan suporta ng ating pamahalaan. In terms of unemployment, it is a big problem, especially youth unemployment, kasi maraming nawalan na kabataan dito ng trabaho dahil most of our youth who are employed work in service-related industries, and they were the ones who really were severely affected by the lockdowns. Again, I fully support Vice President Robredo's proposal to create a national unemployment insurance program, and as well for our youth to find ways to make sure that they can fit the changing job market. The job market before COVID is so different from the job market that we have now. And we must be able to ensure that our graduates will be able to find jobs as soon as they finish college. Related po dyan, although it's not directly related, is education, because we have we have an education crisis, put it that way. If you look at all the studies that we see from time to time in the news, World Bank, etc., we are lagging behind other countries in terms of our children's education. Sabi nga nila, di ba, bottom na tayo pagdating sa math, science, English, etc. We have to do something about it, and our government's not even talking about it. If we want to ensure that our children will be productive members of society after they finish school, then we must fix up our educational system. And that's going to require also, I think, not really so much legislation, but more of oversight and making sure that our Department of Education and other government institutions like Chel do their jobs and do it well, and do not waste also the people's money. Simple lang naman po yung ating hangarin sa buhay, di ba? Bilang mga Pilipino, ang gusto lang naman natin ay sapat na pagkain sa lamesa, maayos at disenteng trabaho, na makapag-aral ang ating mga anak, at masaganang buhay. Pero para makamit natin yan, ay kailangan na yung mga nagkakasala dyan, yung mga nagnanakaw ng pera ng bayan, ay maparusahan. Kailangan meron silang pananagutan. At yun ang isang talagang halos hindi natin makita sa ngayon dito sa atin. Kaya ang tingin ko lang po ay kailangan natin lagyan ng kagat ang hustisya at bigyan ng ngipin ang batas. At ako po, si Attorney Chel Diokno, ay handang-handa maging abogado ng mga dehado tulad ng nagagawa ko na itong nakaraang mga 3 dekada at magsilbi lalo ng bilang ngipin ng batas sa ating Senado. Maraming salamat po. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Attorney Chel. Natutuwa naman ako, no, na talagang yung mga talagang nadama natin the past decades, no, na talagang napabayaan ay talagang tututukan ninyo. Lalong-lalo na yung graft and corruption na parang ano na ba, centuries na nasa atin pa. So tama kayo, no? So kailangan natin ng education. Sabi nyo, paano nga ba ito maiaayos? Meron na kasi ako mga naka-interview, baka makatulong lang sa inyo, is really, napakasimple lang. Marami kong kabataan di marunong magbasa. Hindi sila, as in, umaabot sila ng grade 6, hindi sila marunong magbasa. Kasi meron tayong batas yata na bawal maglagpak. So maski hindi siya nakakabasa, dire-diretso. Tapos kulang tayo ng mga scientists and engineers. So sana, no, kung mai-include niyo yan doon. Tapos, natuwa rin ako doon sa SALIN kasi noon hindi ko rin yung pinapansin. So meron rin pala po kaming karapatan na humingi ng kopya noon. Basta magbayad lang kami ng fee.
Yes, yan ang nakasulat sa ating batas. That's a ministerial duty. Ibig sabihin, walang discretion dapat yung may hawak ng SALIN. Kailangan niya ibigay yon.
Pero ngayon hindi pwede. Hindi na.
Ngayon ay iniiba nila yung interpretation. At
Iniiba nila.
kahit wala sa batas, they are giving themselves the discretion to say no when the law never contemplated that.
Sir, eto na po, galing po sa ating mga participants mula kay Cesar Villanueva. Ito po ang tanong niya. How will you dovetail your justice agenda with also the peace agenda of transforming the armed conflict?
Thank you for that, Cesar. I think that the peace and justice really go hand in hand. And part of the issue we have with those who are engaged in armed insurgencies are the underlying problems that led them to that radical position.
Mhm.
And unless we can deal with those underlying problems and make them understand that the government and the society itself is ready and willing to address those problems, we will never be able to stop these armed forces from doing sowing the kind of violence that they have been doing for a long time. And that will require give and take on both sides. It's going to require a lot of diplomacy, but the bottom line is it will require a willingness on the part of government to go to the negotiating table and sit down with them under conditions that are mutually acceptable. And that is going to be a big challenge for any government, but especially for the coming administration. Kailangan na pagplanuhan nila at mapatupad nila yan ng maayos. Because we cannot, especially since we want to come out of a pandemic, we cannot be doing that and addressing our economic problems and yet at the same time having to deal with insurgency. Kaya sana maisantabi na natin yan, and that will really allow us to focus on the deep problems that we have been facing for a long time.
Okay, salamat po, Attorney Chel. Second question from Beth Aldeacqua. When you become senator, which committee in the Senate would you want to be part of and why?
Well, of course, the Committee on Justice and Human Rights would be a perfect fit for me. But of course, there's a lot of jockeying for position when it comes to committee chairmanships especially and memberships as well. Kaya it's going to require, that's probably the first challenge of any new senator, is to see how he or she can get into the committees that he or she wants to have a say in.
Okay, thanks. Salamat. And then from Pancho, political dynasty is a major root cause of corruption. How do you intend to address this?
Number one, we need to have the numbers both in the Senate and in Congress to pass a decent political dynasty law. While there have been, let's put it this way, voices in the wilderness from time to time, and even in the concluded this present Congress who have been pushing for a political dynasty law, the realistic fact is that the numbers just aren't there. So the first thing we need is, and ito panawagan ko na rin sa lahat ng botante, ay kailangan ang iboboto natin ay talagang mga progresibong kandidato na papayag magpasa ng isang makatao at maayos na anti-political dynasty law. Once we have the numbers, crafting the law itself is fairly easy because there are already a number of bills. Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't be that difficult to iron out the differences in terms of to what extent do you consider it a dynasty, ilan bang degree of consanguinity. Of course, may mga debate yan, pero madaling ayusin yan basta we have enough people who will support it.
Sa ngayon po ba, do you have an idea kung ba't hindi yan makapasa-pasado?
Well, one reason, of course, is because, especially in the lower house, there are, although I guess it would apply to both chambers, there are a lot who belong to political dynasties.
So this will never happen?
Hindi naman. Kaya nga nasa botante na yan eh. Nasa atin na yan.
Sa botante na yan. Oo.
The positive thing about it is our electorate, our voters are getting younger and younger. Okay. Right now, 53% more or less of our registered voters are young people. The I was informed that of the new voters who were able to register, around 4 million are new first-time voters. So malaking impact ang kabataan sa ating eleksyon. Sana lang ay talagang gamitin nila yung kanilang karapatang bumoto at gamitin nila ng maayos.
4 million. 3 po dyan, anak ko.
Ay.
Kaya maski seniors po kami, may influence din kami sa kabataan. Okay? Sa aming mga anak at syempre sa mga giging up po namin, di ba? Okay, next question from Lorna Fabian. How can we help you in your collaterals? Do you have printable materials? Attorney, sasagutin ko Okay, for anybody, Lorna and anybody who wants to help no, by printing those collaterals. Now, please go up dun sa message ni Maite Gallego. Sabi niya, you may download the designs for Attorney Chel's tarps, poster stickers, ballers from this link. Ayun, diokno.ph/collaterals. Okay, yan. Kasi dapat, attorney, ganito yan kilalanin natin sila. Sa parting to, dapat, ito na, tulungan natin sila. O mamaya pag-uusapan natin yan, how else we can help you. O ito naman, tanong from Francisca Bustamante. What will you do to help address the drug problem?
The drug problem has to be addressed by a justice system that works and that will target the people behind it. I think we must distinguish between the drugs issue as a health problem, which we should apply to those who are caught using or addicted or being addicted to drugs, and those who are shipping the drugs in and really masterminding the syndicates that operate these drugs into the country. Other countries have adopted that approach and have been very, very successful. What has happened in our country, it's been the reverse. Even our Supreme Court has recognized in so many cases, pati mga justice natin nagtataka at nagagalit na. Bakit daw halos lahat ng mga kaso na umaabot sa Supreme Court, puro 0.001 na gramo ng shabu lang ang involved. So you have thousands upon thousands of cases and thousands upon thousands of Filipinos who are in jail because they cannot afford bail for tiny, minuscule amounts of drugs. But nobody being prosecuted and put in jail for bringing in the tons that are the real reason and that should be the real target of the government. So what has happened? We have congested jails. Our jails are among the worst in the entire world. According to a poll report last year, our jails are congested by 415%. And most of the people there are there for drug cases of ganong katiting na gramo ng shabu. Yung maliliit na sachet, and there's a big issue there because in my own experience, having studied the war on drugs, ang daming issue dyan about planting of evidence. It's so easy to plant that tiny drugs. Yes. But you plant a ton, hindi mo na pwedeng gawin yon. Pag may nahuli ka ng dala-dala niya isang ton ng shabu, hindi naman na pwede sabihin na planted yun, ano? So we must reorient our justice system so that it targets the masterminds and also that those who are just part of the drug culture be treated for them as a health problem. Okay. And that they be offered proper treatment and rehabilitation.
Wow, ito hindi ko alam kung dapat kong tanongin pero nandito sabi, attorney, kayo daw po ang sinabi nyo kayo ay boses ng katarungan. Maaari po bang malaman ng nagtanong kung meron na po ba kayong nagawa tungkol sa EJK?
Ako po ay isa sa mga naghain ng petisyon sa Korte Suprema noong talagang laganap ang EJK dahil sa war on drugs. At dahil doon sa kasong petisyon na final namin, naporsige ang ating pamahalaan na isubmit sa Supreme Court yung lahat ng datos tungkol sa war on drugs.
Ganun po ba?
Dahil din doon, mismong kinilala ng Supreme Court na mula July 2016 hanggang November 2017, so that's only something like 17 months, 20,322 Filipinos were killed.
Wow.
That's only for that short period of time. So by now, that number is higher than that. Wala pang, although I have to say this also, wala pang final decision ang kasong yon. But at least we have made some gains in terms of requiring the government to be more transparent in terms of providing information to another branch of government, the judiciary, and also putting out in the open the terrible tragedy of so many people being killed. And yet, I have to ask this to everyone, has this addressed really the problem of drugs in the country? Has it changed? Na-solve ba natin yung problem after these 20,000 people were killed? And nandun pa rin ang problema.
Pa rin, yes.
Kaya ako, obvious na obvious, hindi yun ang tamang solusyon pagdating sa drugs. Aside from that, I have also been involved in several cases where we have managed to, we actually have one prosecution of a person who was the victim of an EJK. Akala nila ay napatay na siya. He managed to live and escape.
Oh.
And he was charged with drug possession, which was not true. The case eventually was dismissed, and now we have a counter charge against the police officers who did this to him. So that's another case. I've also been involved in documenting, I cannot tell you the number anymore, of how many families have who have held relatives who were killed. Many of them were afraid to file cases kasi sabi nila sa amin, what's your assurance to us that we will not be also killed? And I cannot give them any promise. I'm just a lawyer. I don't have any way of protecting them. So I told them, okay, ganito na lang po. We will document your case so that we know the witnesses, we gather the evidence, we get affidavits from everybody. Anyway, mahaba naman po ang prescriptive period. But at least when you decide to file and it's safe for you to file, we have the evidence necessary to file. So kami ay gumawa ng isang template. We went around training church workers, members of human rights organizations and others on how to make proper documentation of EJKs. I have also been involved in helping really study and find out what the government is doing as far as EJKs are concerned. So I've devoted quite much of my time to looking into this problem and finding ways to help so many victims. I want to make a point that I agree with the government. We must address the drug problem. That's not an issue.
Yes.
The issue is what is the proper way to do it that will be effective and at the same time that will be humane.
Yeah. Attorney, ngayon ko lang talaga naiintindihan kung gaano kahalaga ang isang abogado. Kasi nga naman, hindi ka pwedeng puro reklamo ng reklamo. Kailangan meron kang isampang kaso at abogado ang kailangan yan. No wonder every family dreams of having a lawyer and a doctor and perhaps an engineer. So ang swerte naman ng pamilya nyo, kayo lang po bang abogado sa magkakapatid?
Hindi po. I have a sister who's a lawyer and a brother who's a lawyer also.
Wow, ang galing. O ito na po, ito ha. Regarding sexual predators, what steps have you done to protect the victims?
Well, I get requests for all kinds of violations of human rights. And to the extent that I can help victims of human rights cases, I do. But I'm only human. When we each have in the human rights community our own, call it specializations. So when it comes to issues involving the rights of women, issues involving sexual abuse, generally I work with or pass on the cases to the lawyers who really do this on a daily basis. Kasi iba yung mga kasong ganon kesa sa mga in the same way, when they have cases that involve EJK about drugs, for example, sa akin naman nila binabato.
Okay.
So I am only human. I cannot handle
Yes.
each and every case for each and every kind of violation. Although I have tried to expand my abilities, I do handle, for example, environmental cases as well, and other cases. I have been involved in a few sexual abuse cases, but you know, for you to really handle those kinds of cases well, kailangan talagang alam na alam mo yung practice na yan. And I'll be the first to admit, I have not deeply been involved in that practice.
Thank you, Attorney. Ito naman po, ano naman daw ang inyong posisyon sa ICC?
Oh, well, that is very clear, I think, from all previous statements I've made. The ICC is there, and the reason why our government ratified the Rome Statute, that's the treaty of the ICC, is to ensure accountability. Na pagka ang kinakasuhan ay mataas-taas na opisyal dito sa atin at malaki ang impluensya niya, na alam natin may hirapan tayo na makakakuha ng hustisya pag dito ililitis ang kaso, ay meron pa rin tayong paraan para mapanagot natin siya. That's precisely why the ICC is there. The court operates on the principle that it's only when it's going to be very difficult to prosecute that person in the home country that the court, the ICC, will take jurisdiction and handle the case. Now, question, will it be hard, for example, for a Philippine court to fairly prosecute the president of the Philippines? I believe so. Because the president, even if, in the first place, if that president is incumbent, he enjoys under our law presidential immunity. So he cannot be charged, he cannot be prosecuted during his incumbency. Kahit sabihin natin na tapos na yung kanyang term, by the end of his or her term, that president would have appointed so many people in the judiciary. The existing president, for example, by February would have appointed, if I'm not mistaken, 14 out of the 15 justices in the Supreme Court. He would have appointed so many justices in the Sandigan Bayan, in the Court of Appeals, as well as prosecutors who operate in front of these courts. So can we expect that they will be able to independently and fairly give the president his day in court and give the people their day in court, aside from the other issues that the other influences that could be brought to bear upon the judges who will decide that case? Kasi we've seen it in earlier previous prosecutions of past presidents that a lot of pressure and influence can be brought upon the juries who will decide the case and the prosecutors who will prosecute it. So if you're talking about a court that can do this without any influence from within the country, it's really the ICC that would be in the best position. And the judges there are fair. They cannot be bought. They cannot be influenced or in any way. So that's my position.
So there is hope. Now, this question I think is very, very important to you. What will you do differently this campaign period that you were not able to do in the last election to reach the D and E voters?
What will I do differently? Everything.
Talaga?
Well, and 2019 was a total learning experience for me. The decision itself to enter politics really brought me out of my comfort zone. I had never in my life ever thought about even entering politics. If I did, then dati pa dapat when I was younger, dapat ginawa ko na. But for so many years, I was content just being a lawyer, an educator, human rights defender. Kaya lang, when 2019 came around, I realized that there was so much more at stake in that election and in this election, because it's our entire way of life that's at stake. It's our democracy that's at stake. It's our rights and our freedoms that are at stake. And I said to myself, if I just kept quiet and did not do anything, I'm complicit na rin in what's happening. So I decided, even if I had no political ambition, no political understanding, no political network, no political nothing,
Uh-huh.
I decided to, sige, subukan natin. So the 2019 was a complete learning experience for me, and I learned so much about politics in that campaign. I learned how important it is to have a network on the ground, how important it is in terms of your messaging, how important it is to have a good communications team, how important it is to have the funding. Naku, that is the
Yeah.
biggest thing. Because it's not a level playing field.
Mhm.
Elections are not level playing field. A candidate who may be the most unqualified, who may the least articulate, who may not have any skills at all to win, can win as long as he has the hundreds of millions of pesos to pay for good TV ads, to get the best ad agencies to make their ads and to run them on the television. Kaya all of this, I think, made me realize that running a campaign requires a totally different mindset. Kaya dala ko lahat yon dito sa kampanyang ito.
So you are more ready. Just
Definitely.
definitely.
My team is intact, nadagdagan pa kami.
Talaga. Uh-huh.
I'm very confident of our ground network now.
Uh-huh.
And we have signed up about 15,000 volunteers already, which that
Really?
number, we never reached that number in 2019. We have an excellent comms team, both in social media and in traditional media.
Mhm.
I have volunteers even who come from some of the best creative agencies in the country. So, you know, ang kulang na lang namin,
Yes, anong
honestly,
kulang?
is the fuel, the finances to
The
pay for
finances.
these so
Oo.
expensive television ads.
So ganito, Attorney Chel, at this point, may I request Rina to post something there sa ating screen? Kasi kung gusto natin pong tulungan si Attorney Chel, ito po ang kailangan niya. So, pwede bang screenshot ninyo ito to support his campaign? Kasi nakahanda na daw sila, handang-handa na. Yung gasolina na lang po ang kailangan. So there are two ways: support the campaign and then print and distribute their campaign materials. So salamat, Rina, for that. So attorney, ito pa, may isa pang question. Sana hindi mangyari, but should you not make it to the Senate and you were offered a position in government, where do you think can you work best and why?
Well, number one, it would depend on who offers me that position.
Mhm.
If I believe in them and I believe they are principled, then I may consider in a position. Of course, may ban yan. You cannot take any position for a year
Mhm.
from the time of elections. If ever I'm offered, I think I could contribute a lot either in the Office of the Ombudsman or the Department of Justice.
Oh, okay. Next. Ano po ang non-negotiable themes, topics, or concerns ninyo?
I'm not sure what the question is pertaining.
Okay.
Um,
For example, divorce. Non-negotiable ba yan? Or pro-life issues? Or environment? Any issues or concerns na hindi nyo papatulan, hindi nyo susuportahan? Meron po bang ganon sa
Definitely,
inyo? Yes.
the death penalty is something I will never ever vote
Okay.
for. It's the certainty of punishment that will stop crime. It's not the severity. I know that from my own personal experience. I've handled so many death penalty cases, and during the time we had the death penalty law, even our Supreme Court recognized in one case that it is anti-poor, because it really, more than around 70% of those who were sentenced to death during the time we had the death penalty law were wrongfully convicted.
Mhm.
And when we are in Flag made the study of the people in death row, we realized that based on the survey that we conducted, really a super majority of them are from the poorest of the poor. So ang talagang natatamaan ng death penalty ay yung ating mga kapatid na mahihirap. Aside from that, for moral reasons as well, I do not believe that human beings have the power to pass judgment on other human beings to the extent of taking their lives. I believe the most we can do in terms of passing judgment is in putting them in prison if they commit crimes. I don't think we have God gave us the power to take their lives. It's only God, I believe, who can do that.
Attorney, it's almost 7 o'clock. Pero pwede pa buwang magtanong sa inyo? Okay pa ba?
If you don't mind, just maybe 1 or 2 questions. Sorry, I've had a very long day and I just had my booster yesterday. So medyo nararamdaman ko na yung
napapagod na si attorney. Okay.
I started the day this morning with an interview with Karen Davila, and since then I've had several other events.
Sige, last 2 questions. What is your position on trade liberalization?
Okay, well, I think that when we speak of, we have whatever kind of liberalization we're talking about, we must make sure we protect our own. And that applies both to trade in general and to importation, especially of goods and products, especially food, into the country as well. Kasi yung isa kong talagang ikinababahala, yung we are sacrificing the interest, for example, of our farmers and even our fisher folk by allowing the same products to be brought in from other countries, and which now is bought by our consumers because they say, oh, mas mura to, etc., etc. Okay, sige, you're helping the consumer, pero paano naman yung ating mga in charge ng food security dito sa atin, yung mga mangingisda natin, yung mga magsasaka. And more generally, when you talk about trade liberalization, I think it must always be in the parameters of making sure that hindi tayo nalulugi at yung mga sector natin na hindi nalulugi.
Last na po, ito na, from PV Belay, what can be done to enforce the win of the Philippines in the UNCLOS?
So much can be done. I think we must abandon the bilateral approach of negotiating only with China. Kasi luging-lugi tayo doon. We're dealing with a superpower and here we are, we're just a tiny nation in the scheme of things internationally. How can we get power and bargaining leverage? Working with our ASEAN neighbors, especially those who also have similar interests in that area of the world. Establishing, for example, agreements with our ASEAN neighbors like Vietnam, Indonesia, and the other countries that also have interest in that area. That we will, for example, in terms of fishing there, in terms of protecting the environment. Justice Carpio has a very excellent formula for that. And I fully support his proposals that we work with our ASEAN, the other ASEAN nations, come up with the conventions and agreements with them, because that will strengthen our bargaining position with China.
Wow. Attorney Chel, thank you so much. Pagod na kayo. Kung pwede nga kayong painumin namin ng Mighty 80 drink. So first of all, we'd like to thank you for, kayo po nagsimula nitong Kilalanin natin sila series namin because you wanted to reach out to us. So maraming salamat kasi nakita namin talaga na yung mga hindi kilala, dapat mabigyan sila ng isang venue o platform kung paano namin sila mapakikinggan. So maraming salamat. Talagang abogado kayo ng mga dehado, and right now dehadong-dehado na po kami. So kailangan namin kayo sa Senado. So uulitin ko lang po, kung gusto niyo po tulungan si Attorney Chel Diokno, nandiyan po sa chat box ang ayan naka-screen na pinakita na sa ating screen how to help. Yan ang kanilang in terms of funding and in terms of printing and distributing their campaign materials. Attorney, salamat po uli.
Thank you at paalam. Maraming salamat.
Paalam, Mary for you.
Photo op lang tayo.
Sige, photo op. Sir, isang lang.
Can we have everybody turn on their videos? Let's just have a picture, please.
Who's doing it?
I'm
You are? All right.
Wala ako na.
Okay, all cameras on.
I'm checking. Wait.
Bambi.
Yes. Mon Paterno there. Okay. Rocky.
Bambi, your camera.
Garcia. All right.
Rina.
Rina. Kathy Paz.
Dami pa hindi naka-video on ha in the
Yeah.
last
Second,
Marines Panlili.
Beverly Tan, please.
Cesar, Chona. Last call to turn your videos on, please. We have recorded this session. So for those who came in late, we will post this in the Facebook page, Ateneo Facebook page, and our Mighty 80 YouTube channel. For those who would like to view this again, please contact anyone in the org team so we can give you the access to the
Thank
YouTube
you.
channel and the Facebook page.
Thank
Thank
you,
you po.
Attorney.
Thank
Attorney
you po,
Chel, thank you so
Attorney Chel.
much.
Thank you.
Salamat,
Have a good
Attorney
evening.
Chel.
Good evening.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Can the org team stay for a while?
Thank you
Thank
to
you
our
everyone for coming
participants.
in.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Salamat,
And to
salamat.
Team Chel, thank you.
We still have a few more.
Quick, ano lang tayo? Quick post-mortem.
Yes. We still have a few, ha? We still have a few guests.
Yeah.
I will start removing na people. Sorry.
Si Manny Coloma pala nandito.
Guwapo sa picture.
You want me to stop recording already?
Yes, please.